Welcome to True Unseen Crime, where the truth hides in plain sight. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the unseen is always closer than you think. For months, Agent Curtis Monroe believed Mr. Fuzzles was finally gone, destroyed in the fire along with the cursed coin. But the package left on his doorstep proved otherwise. The bear in the box wasn't Mr. Fuzzles, not exactly. This one was smaller, duller, and missing an eye. Yet something about it felt wrong. Monroe swore he heard faint whispers when he held it, a cold, distant voice, like something reaching out from beyond. The forgotten survivor. Determined to uncover the truth, Monroe revisited the FBI's files on Charles Hargrove. Among the names buried in the case notes, one stood out. Elias Greaves, a former housekeeper at Hargrove's estate who vanished the night of Hargrove's death. Monroe tracked Greaves to a rundown care home in rural Vermont, a place that smelled of mildew and forgotten memories. Greaves was frail, his eyes clouded with age. But when Monroe mentioned Mr. Fuzzles, the old man's gaze sharpened with sudden clarity. "You should have left it alone," Greaves muttered, his voice shaking. Greaves revealed what no one had known. Charles Hargrove had two bears. The first was Mr. Fuzzles, the one that inherited his fortune. But the second, that was something else entirely. "He called it the shadow, said it would keep him safe," Greaves whispered. "Said the darkness would guard the light." According to Greaves, Hargrove believed Mr. Fuzzles carried his soul, while the shadow held something far worse, a vengeful spirit bound to the iron coin. The fire may have destroyed Mr. Fuzzles, but the shadow had survived. The chain of death. Shortly after Monroe's visit, Greaves was found dead, his face twisted in terror, his fingers curled tightly around a single, scorched teddy bear button. Realizing he was being hunted, Monroe turned to the one person he believed could help, Father Ezekiel Corin, a retired priest who specialized in spiritual warfare. Father Corin listened intently as Monroe recounted the entire ordeal, from Hargrove's mysterious death to the cursed coin and the twisted faces he'd seen in the fire. The priest's face turned grim. "The souls were never freed," Corin warned. "The fire didn't destroy them, it released them." Monroe's chest tightened. "So, where are they now?" he asked. Corin's answer was chilling. "Still bound to the bear, but now it's no longer just a vessel. It's a hunter." The ritual of release. Corin believed there was only one way to stop the shadow, a ritual designed to sever the spirit's hold over its victims. But it required bait, someone tied to Mr. Fuzzles' past. That person was Monroe. The ritual would need to be performed at the site of the original curse, Hargrove's abandoned mansion in Maine. The mansion's secret. The estate was cold and lifeless when Monroe and Father Corin arrived. Furniture lay draped in dusty sheets, and faded portraits of Charles Hargrove's grim face lined the walls. But one room, the nursery, looked untouched. Toys still lined the shelves, and a faded rocking chair swayed ever so slightly as if someone had just left it. On the chair sat the shadow, stitched from the same fabric as Mr. Fuzzles, but with empty black sockets where its button eyes once were. It moved. The shadows had twisted toward Monroe, and the whispers began. Faint at first, then louder, building into distorted cries that seemed to come from every corner of the room. "You shouldn't have come back." The voices groaned. The lights flickered. The air turned ice cold. Monroe felt a crushing pressure on his chest, like unseen hands were trying to squeeze the breath from his lungs. Father Corin began the ritual, chanting in a language Monroe couldn't understand. The whispers grew louder, rising to an unnatural pitch. Then, Monroe saw them. The faces. Dozens of tormented souls began to emerge from the shadows, distorted, twisted faces of Mr. Fuzzles' victims, including the Whisperer, his face stretched in frozen agony. And at the center of it all stood Charles Hargrove. His hollow eyes locked onto Monroe. "He's coming," Hargrove's voice rasped. "He's coming for you all." Suddenly, the shadow launched itself from the chair, its claw-like paws stretching unnaturally toward Monroe's face. The final confrontation. Monroe grabbed the bear and forced it into the circle Father Corin had drawn in chalk. The priest's voice rose to a deafening shout, and the room trembled violently. The shadow's blackened stitching began to split, threads unraveling as the tormented faces twisted and screamed. The bear's lifeless sockets began to glow, two burning red points that locked on Monroe. "You can't stop him," the whispers cried. With one final chant, Father Corin plunged a silver dagger, blessed with holy oil, straight through the bear's heart. The room erupted in a blinding white flash. When the light faded, the shadow was gone. But in the corner of the room, Monroe saw one final image that would haunt him for years. Scorched into the wall was a crude drawing, a child's scribbled image of a teddy bear with glowing red eyes. And beneath it, 3 words scratched into the wood. "He's not alone." The aftermath. The FBI declared the case closed, believing the shadow was destroyed. Monroe knew better. Somewhere out there, something still lingered, something worse than Mr. Fuzzles or the shadow. Because the final words Hargrove spoke kept echoing in Monroe's mind. "He's coming for you all." And Monroe knew whoever, or whatever, was behind the curse wasn't finished yet. The weeks following the shadow's destruction were uneasy for Agent Curtis Monroe. Nightmares tormented him, distorted whispers in forgotten tongues, faces emerging from smoke, and always the image of a crude teddy bear scrawled in crimson. But one night, the dream changed. This time, Monroe stood inside a vast stone chamber, walls carved with symbols he didn't understand. In the center, figures in blood-red robes surrounded a twisted effigy, a grotesque statue of Mr. Fuzzles, its glassy eyes glowing like embers. One figure stepped forward, face shrouded in darkness, and whispered, "He is coming. The Bear King shall rise, and all will kneel beneath the crimson eye." The forgotten manuscript. Determined to find answers, Monroe returned to Father Corin. The priest, exhausted from the ordeal at Hargrove's estate, now walked with a limp and kept a silver cross close at all times. When Monroe described his dream, Corin paled. "The crimson eye," Corin muttered. He rummaged through his old study, finally pulling out a dust-covered manuscript, a Tibetan text known as the Doctrine of Wingshin. The faded pages told the legend of a cursed idol, an entity that could consume souls, growing stronger with each victim. The cult that worshipped this force believed it would one day awaken as a king, a being that would manifest in an innocent form like a child's toy. The cult was known as the Crimson Eye. "They believe he'll return as a vessel for their dark master," Corin warned. "And if they've found you, they think you're part of the prophecy." The message in blood. Days later, Monroe's neighbor, a retired mailman named Frank, was found dead in his home. His face was twisted in frozen terror, his fingers curled as if grasping for something. On his living room wall, written in smeared crimson, were the words, "The Bear King comes." And in Frank's hand was a teddy bear button, the secret network. Monroe reached out to his FBI contacts, digging deeper into unsolved deaths and strange symbols. Patterns emerged, unexplained heart failures, red handprints, and rumors of a cult moving quietly through small towns and cities. One name kept appearing, the Crimson Jackals, the syndicate that once tried to steal Mr. Fuzzles. Monroe finally found a surviving jackal, a low-level runner named Victor Lasky, now in hiding. Lasky agreed to talk, but only in person. The meeting took place in an abandoned diner outside Boston. Lasky arrived twitching and paranoid, his fingers drumming nervously on the table. "You think it's just the bear?" Lasky whispered. "You don't know what you're up against." According to Lasky, the Crimson Jackals weren't just thieves. They'd been working for the Crimson Eye all along. Their mission wasn't to steal Mr. Fuzzles, it was to awaken him. "The bear was just a shell," Lasky warned. "The real power, the real thing, it's still out there. And it's looking for you." Before Monroe could ask more, Lasky's gaze drifted to the window, his face draining of color. "They found me," he whispered. In the glass's reflection, Monroe glimpsed a figure in a crimson robe standing beneath a flickering streetlight. When Monroe turned back, Lasky was slumped forward, blood trickling from his nose. His face frozen in the same twisted expression of terror that had claimed the others. The bloodline revelation. That night, Monroe returned home shaken. He barely noticed the figure waiting in the shadows until it was too late. The hooded man grabbed Monroe by the collar and pressed a jagged blade to his throat. "You're not just a witness," the man snarled. "You're part of the prophecy." Monroe fought back, throwing the man off balance. The hooded figure stumbled, revealing his face, Charles Hargrove's face, but warped, aged, and bearing a cruel grin. Except it wasn't Hargrove. "You carry his blood," the man rasped, blood dripping from his mouth. "His curse is yours now." The man collapsed, a crimson symbol branded across his chest, the sigil of the Crimson Eye. The Bear King awakens. The following morning, Monroe visited the FBI archives, searching Hargrove's genealogy. What he found chilled him to the bone. Charles Hargrove had an illegitimate son, one the courts never knew about. That child had been adopted and renamed. That child's grandson was Curtis Monroe. The curse wasn't random. Monroe's bloodline tied him directly to the Bear's twisted legacy. The Crimson Eye believed Monroe was the final key, a vessel through which the Bear King would rise. The final omen. That night, Monroe's phone buzzed. A single image appeared, a photo taken from inside his home. In the photo, Monroe lay asleep in his bed. And at the foot of the bed sat a small teddy bear. Its glassy eyes glowed faint red. Agent Curtis Monroe stared at the photo on his phone, the glowing-eyed bear sitting at the foot of his bed, and knew one thing for certain. He wasn't alone. Gun in hand, Monroe swept through his apartment, checking every corner. Empty. Yet the air felt wrong. Heavy, like something unseen lingered just beyond his sight. On his nightstand, where his lamp once sat, lay something else, a single, scorched teddy bear button. The whispers returned, faint, hissing words that seemed to come from inside the walls. "He's coming. The Bear King shall rise." Monroe fled the apartment, heart racing. The cult's warning. The next morning, Monroe contacted Father Corin. They met in a secluded church, surrounded by stained-glass windows that seemed to bleed crimson light as the sun set. Corin's face was grim. "The Crimson Eye believes you're the key," the priest said. "They think the Bear King needs your blood to manifest in full." Monroe's mind raced. "If they need me alive, why the warnings? Why the threats?" Corin's face darkened. "Because they're not just preparing you," he muttered. "They're breaking you." The Crimson Eye's tactics weren't just about fear. They were designed to weaken Monroe's mind, opening him to the dark force that had once possessed Mr. Fuzzles. "They don't just want your blood," Corin warned. "They want your will, to make you invite him in." The Crimson Mark. That night, Monroe barely slept. When he awoke, something cold burned against his chest. Lifting his shirt, he froze. Etched into his skin, just above his heart, was a crude symbol, a twisted eye surrounded by jagged lines, the mark of the Crimson Eye. He hadn't felt a thing. The hidden trail. Desperate for answers, Monroe traced old FBI files on the Crimson Jackals. Buried within the records was a forgotten lead, a man named Samuel Greaves, the grandson of Elias Greaves, Hargrove's former housekeeper. Samuel had vanished years ago, but Monroe discovered a property under his name, an abandoned slaughterhouse on the outskirts of Salem, Massachusetts. Monroe knew he had no choice. The slaughterhouse ritual. The building reeked of rust and decay. Animal hooks dangled from the rafters, and old bloodstains darkened the walls. But what caught Monroe's eye was the circle drawn in crimson at the room's center. In the middle sat the bear. Not Mr. Fuzzles. Not the shadow. Something new. This bear was larger, its face stitched into a wicked grin. Jagged lines embroidered its chest, a distorted version of the Crimson Eye sigil. And as Monroe stared at it, he swore he saw it breathe. The whispers returned, louder than ever. "The king comes. The king comes." Figures emerged from the shadows, robed cultists in crimson hoods. One stepped forward, a man with empty sockets where his eyes should have been. "It's time," the eyeless man rasped. The cultists began chanting, and the bear's chest moved, the thread splitting as something inside tried to push through. Monroe raised his gun, but his arms suddenly felt paralyzed. His chest tightened, as if unseen fingers were clutching his heart. The bear's eyes snapped open, two burning red orbs. The chanting reached a fever pitch. "You can't stop him now," the eyeless man sneered. "He's in you, and soon he'll be free." The battle within. The whispers grew deafening, filling Monroe's mind with twisted visions, faces warped in agony, their eyes hollowed and bleeding. Then came the voice, low and guttural, yet disturbingly familiar. "You are mine now, Curtis, asterisk." Monroe staggered, feeling something clawing at his thoughts, a presence trying to take hold. Memories twisted, his childhood, his parents, his career, all becoming warped and blurred. "I am the king," the voice roared. Monroe fell to his knees. His breathing slowed. He felt himself slipping away, but then he remembered something. Charles Hargrove's warning. "He's coming, but you can resist him." Gritting his teeth, Monroe focused. He blocked out the whispers, forced his mind to remember who he was. He was Curtis Monroe, an FBI agent, a survivor. And he wasn't going down without a fight. With a roar, Monroe drew his silver knife, the one Father Corin had blessed, and drove it straight into the bear's chest. The bear screeched, a hideous, ear-piercing wail that shook the walls. The cultist staggered back as black smoke poured from the bear's body, forming a twisted, skeletal face with burning red eyes. "This is not over," the voice bellowed before vanishing into the rafters. The aftermath. By the time backup arrived, the cultists had fled, leaving behind a single warning scrawled in blood across the wall. "The king still rises." Monroe knew the fight wasn't over. The Crimson Eye wasn't finished, and the force behind the curse was still watching. But Monroe had learned one thing that night: the Bear King could bleed. And next time, Monroe would be ready. Weeks had passed since Monroe's encounter at the slaughterhouse, yet the shadow of the Bear King still lingered. Sleep came in brief, tortured intervals. Every time Monroe closed his eyes, he saw the same twisted image, the skeletal face with burning red eyes, whispering, "You can't stop me." But the worst part wasn't the nightmares, it was the mark. Despite everything, the Crimson Eye symbol on Monroe's chest had darkened, the jagged lines growing sharper, almost as if they were spreading. "You're still connected," Father Corin warned during their last meeting. "He hasn't let go." The Bear King wasn't finished with him. The disappearance. News broke that morning. A family had vanished in Rockport, Maine, just hours from where Charles Hargrove's mansion once stood. The only clue left behind? A child stuffed bear, its face missing, placed on the family's dining table. Monroe knew this wasn't random. The Crimson Eye was back. The secret society. Father Corin revealed that during his research on the Crimson Eye, he'd found references to a secret organization, a hidden order formed centuries ago to stop the Bear King's rise. Known only as the Order of St. Gallus, they were believed to possess ancient relics capable of severing demonic bonds. Monroe tracked down their last known descendant, Elias Ward, a retired historian living in Vermont. Ward's face darkened at the mention of the Bear King. "The Crimson Eye isn't just a cult," Ward explained. "Their servants a doorway for something far worse." Ward described a ritual known as the blood binding, a dark ceremony that fused a human soul with a cursed entity. Monroe hadn't merely been marked, he'd been linked to the Bear King itself. "If that bond isn't broken," Ward warned, "he'll consume you from the inside out." Ward revealed an ancient dagger, a relic known as the Blade of St. Gallus, said to pierce both flesh and spirit. It was the only weapon believed capable of banishing the Bear King permanently. But using it came at a cost. Monroe would need to face the entity in its true form, a confrontation that could kill him. The ritual in Rockport. Monroe returned to Rockport, where the missing family's home now stood empty. Inside, crimson symbols had been smeared across the walls, twisted runes that seemed to writhe when stared at too long. And in the basement, Monroe found it. The bear. Its face had been crudely stitched back together with black thread. Its glassy eyes glinted red beneath the dim light. But Monroe barely noticed. His focus was on the twisted figure kneeling before it. The eyeless man. "You've come just in time," the man rasped. "He's almost awake." Around them, the symbols on the walls began to glow. The bear's stitched face seemed to twitch. "He knows you now," the eyeless man sneered. "And once you're his, there's no coming back." The air thickened. Monroe's breath turned shallow as his chest began to burn, the mark searing hotter than ever. His vision blurred as whispers flooded his mind. "You are mine." The room darkened. The bear moved, slowly turning its head toward Monroe. Then its mouth opened, revealing jagged, needle-like teeth. Monroe stumbled, barely raising the blade of St. Gallus in time. The Bear King's twisted form lunged, a shape that wasn't quite solid, yet seemed far too real. "I will wear your skin." With a desperate thrust, Monroe drove the blade into the bear's chest. The creature's scream wasn't just sound, it was a sickening vibration that seemed to claw at Monroe's very thoughts. The Bear King's skeletal face twisted in rage as tendrils of black smoke erupted from the bear's body. This is true unseen crime, where the unseen reveals the unexpected. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because sometimes silence can be deadlier than a scream.